أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحابه ومن اهتدى بهداهم إلى يوم الدين فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي لا تؤاخذني مما يقولون واغفر لي ما لا يعلمون واجعل لي خيرا مما يظنون أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome one more time to the house of dua and welcome to another blessed day of Jummah in the year 1445 after the hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And welcome to the channel from which you learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about his creation, about his message, about his messenger, and of course about his preferred religion known as Al-Islam. And welcome to the channel from which you learn how to live and be happy in the world we live today, and how to return back to Allah for greater happiness and success on the day of accountability. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, today we are coming to you with our continuing exploration of the verses of Surah Al-Hujjuraat. Surah Al-Hujjuraat is chapter 49 of the Holy Quran. And if everybody were to hearken to the verses of Surah Al-Hujjuraat, the world will be a better place for all of us to live. It's a surah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had laid down guidelines for good behavior for us as Muslims. Therefore, it is called the Surah of Etiquette in Islam. We have brought you several verses of this surah in which we highlighted the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the kind of honor and dignity that the messenger Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam should be accorded. And by implication, we are expected to be obedient and respectful to those who are in constituted authority over us. We have also highlighted the need for us to verify information that come to us from time to time before we act on them. Otherwise, we might be hurting innocent people. And when we come to realize that such information was false, we become regretful. Today, we are carrying the exploration further by looking at verses 9 and 10 of Surah Al-Hujjuraat. But before we bring you those verses, let us imagine a world we live in which there is no quarrel, no misunderstanding. Let us imagine a world in which there is mutual obedience. There is no disagreement. Let us imagine a world in which there are no conflicts between nations. Let's imagine a world in which there is no quarrel between husband and wife, between parents and children, between brothers and sisters, between communities. Let's imagine that we live in a world in which there is no civil war in a country. There is no war between another country and another country. Just imagine that kind of situation if it were to exist. How are we going to find a world in which there is no disagreement, there is no quarrel, there is no fighting? Wouldn't that kind of world or reality be a very joyful and peaceful way for all of us? Of course it will be, but unfortunately, we're in a world in which we are bound to disagree. We are bound to disagree in a way that sometimes, if that disagreement is not properly handled, it might lead to a war. It might lead to a big conflict. It could be a civil war. It could be a war between two nations. It could even be a world war. That's why the verses we are bringing to you today is so important. The issue is not whether or not there will be disagreement, or there will be quarrel, or there will be fighting. That's not the issue. The issue is when it happens, how do we handle it? In Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. If it were the wish of your Lord, Ya Muhammad, He would have made mankind one. They will reason the same way. They will love one another the same way. They will also have the same characteristics. They will not have any reason to disagree. They will have the same religion, the same food, the same culture, the same height if possible, and the same color of the skin. Allah has the power to do that, but He decided to differentiate us. He decided to give us opportunities to look differently in some areas. And He said He did so so that He would test us over what He has provided for us. That's another surah, Surah Al-Ma'idah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Hud says, we have the power to have made mankind one, but we decide to make them look differently or behave differently as the case may be. That's why you see them continuously disagreeing among themselves, doing things differently from one another. This is the nature of the creation we find ourselves. So there's no ideal world in which there is no quarrel, there is no disagreement or a different point of view. There's nothing like that. It will continue to happen, but how do we handle it when it happens? That is the issue. This is where the verses we are bringing to you today from Surah Al-Hujjuraat are very important. These are verses that are addressed to us as Muslims. The verses were not just addressing the issues of the time while the Prophet was here, but also they are verses that look at what is going to happen in the future. If there is a disagreement, and that disagreement leads to conflict between two brothers in Islam, or between two nations in Islam, or between two groups within an Islamic nation, or between two groups that don't belong to any Islamic nation, or between two groups, one within Islamic nation and the other non-Islamic nation. How do we resolve that? It doesn't matter whether it is between Muslim brothers and sisters, or between Muslims and non-Muslims, or between Muslim nations and non-Muslim nations. The fact of the matter is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to find amicable settlement to disagreement between us. And when such disagreement gets to a level where there is conflict and one party is showing intransigence, then we need to do something. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, this is where verses 9 and 10 of Surah Al-Hujjuraat become very relevant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِطَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِنْ بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيءَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ فَإِنْ فَاءَتْ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَأَقْسِطُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Amazing two verses. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِطَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا. When two people within yourselves as believers, or two parties within yourself as believers, or two nations within yourselves as believers. So you see the background is the believers themselves. But then it has a wider implication. It has total implication for the world we live today. What if the entire world were to be Muslims? What if the entire world were to listen to the verses of Surah Al-Hujjuraat and comply with the requirements of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The world would be a better place for us. We will be happy in this world, and we'll be returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for greater happiness. But as I said, we are not in an ideal world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when there is a disagreement, and that disagreement leads to a fight, even if it doesn't lead to a fight, it's a mere quarrel. Two people disagree, or two parties. What is expected of the others outside these two parties? Your duty is to make sure you reconcile them. Make sure that they come back to normal terms. In the process of reconciliation, if one of them proved to be intransigent, uncompromising, not willing to resolve the issue, then then all of you need to join together to put pressure on that person, or even subdue that person to a level where he will comply to the commandment of Allah. If he complies or she complies, then resolve their differences equitably, fairly, justly. And those of you who are charged with the responsibility of resolving dispute, this is your guideline. Be fair and just. It's a burden upon you to be fair and just. And Allah loves those who are fair and just. All believers are brothers to one another. All believers are brothers and sisters to one another. Therefore, make sure the relationship between you as brothers and sisters, make sure it is properly in good order. Make sure that you deal with yourself fairly, and if there is disagreement, to resolve the disagreement fairly. All of you should be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah. So that Allah will have mercy upon you. My dear brothers, my dear sisters. In this verse, there is a look into what is coming ahead. There is a guideline for us to resolve our disputes. In this verse, there is a reminder to us that fairness and justice is very important in the life we live. You cannot find in this verse where those who are charged with the responsibility of resolving dispute between two people are told to take sides, or to arm one against the other, or to apply some primordial sentiments in resolving the disputes. Taking sides because this person is of the same color with you, or of the same club, or of the same religion, or of the same family, or of the same job, or any other relationship. And because of that, you will not be fair and just. Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin ala ta'dilu i'dilu huwa aqrabu littaqwa. Do not, because of the conditions of those you are dealing with, whether you share same commonalities with them or not, or there are people you have disagreement with, put aside those conditions when you are charged with the responsibility of resolving disputes. Put aside whatever other considerations you have. Your overriding consideration should be how to restore peace and harmony to such people and to the entire society. And dear brothers and dear sisters, what we find in today's world is different. Let's quickly take a look at areas of flashpoints in the world we live today. Look at Palestine and Israel. Look at Sudan, where there's a civil crisis. Look at Ukraine and Russia. How is the world dealing with them? You are as well informed as I am about that. Do we see any fairness? We can't say so. Not surprising, therefore, that these wars are going on. People are benefiting from them. They are using them as a trading point for themselves. They are not fair. They are not just in the resolution of this crisis. Instead, they are arming one party against the other, supplying weapons for them to kill themselves. This is the world we live. That's not how it's supposed to be. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, yes, as I've stated, these verses were revealed to the prophet, not only to address the issues of the time, but to look forward. What will happen after the prophet had gone? You remember that immediately after the prophet had gone, physically out of this world, there were crises. Civil war, actually, among the Muslims. So Mufassirun says these verses were revealed ahead of time to guide the Muslims in how to deal with such civil wars. You remember the battle of Siffin between Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu and Muawiyah. As a result of that battle, that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu was killed under what circumstances? Sayyidina Usman was attacked by a group of fellow believers. And Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, same thing. In the case of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, at that time it was a civil war within the Islamic world. You also remember the case of the Battle of the Camel. Similar thing happened. It was not surprising, therefore, that these verses were calling on us as believers that if it happens, when two people among the believers are fighting themselves, this is what you need to do. So the guidelines for resolving disputes have been properly spelled out. But are we following the guidelines? Even among the Muslims today, where there are crises here and there, to what extent do we follow the guidelines? As I said, it could be a crisis within a nation, if that nation is a Muslim, or between a nation and another nation, if one of the nations is a Muslim, or between non-Muslim nations. It doesn't matter. Justice is justice. Fairness is fairness. Peace is peace. All of us need peace. Again, the verses are specifically talking to our leaders, those who are in position, how they should help to resolve the crisis. When there's a crisis in the society, it is the responsibility of the leaders. Imagine, for example, in a country where there is a rebellion by one group. It is the responsibility of the leader to find out why that rebellion came in the first instance and to have a dialogue to resolve the issue. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, there's hadith narrated by Tauban radiallahu anhu that one day the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Allah, Ya Allah, do not allow my ummah to suffer famine and hunger when I'm gone. Do not allow my ummah to be subdued or dominated by a non-Muslim body when I'm gone. I do not allow my ummah to disagree and divide themselves by fighting one another. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet, the supplication is in order. The first one will be granted. The second one will be granted. But the third one, I'm afraid, has been ordained. What you should be concerned about is the issue of your ummah fighting among themselves after you are gone. They definitely will find themselves in such situation. But how do they resolve such fighting? It will be a test upon them. And this is the test. When two people among you as believers fight or quarrel or disagree, it's now the responsibility of all of you to make sure you help to resolve that. That is the test. Are we passing that test today? You know as much as I know. In Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when there is a disagreement or a quarrel between a husband and wife, what should we do? Send for a just and wise person from the family of the man and a just and wise person from the family of the woman to sit down to help to reconcile them. If both of them sincerely need reconciliation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it possible. So in the process of reconciliation, we need sincerity to reconcile on the side of the two parties. And we need fairness and justice on the part of those who are coming to bring about the reconciliation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the role of a third party in the resolution of crisis. But as I said, it's a different story we are seeing in the world we live today, even in the Muslim world. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, we are Muslims guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to do things according to the Sharia by following the Quran and the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Crises will always come up from time to time, but how to resolve them is what should be our primary consideration, so that all of us will live in peace in the world we live, and then we'll go back to Allah and even be happier. We continue to tell you from this channel that this is a channel from which you learn how to live and be happy in the world we live today, and how to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for greater happiness. Yes, to achieve that, you need to do something as an individual. But there are other things that affect you or you affect them, and it's beyond your control. This is the kind of situation when crises are there in the nation in which you live. How can there be happiness when there is fighting? But what role will you play to make sure that that crisis is resolved? This is the test that all of us are facing, either as leaders or as followers. As followers, it's our responsibility to put pressure on our leaders to make sure that they do what is right. It's our responsibility to say something when we see something by making sure that the truth is followed. And it's the responsibility of our leaders to treat the citizens fairly and justly so that there will be no crisis in society. And if anyone breaks out inevitably, it is the responsibility of the leader to help to restore order and peace. This is what verses 9 to 10 of Surah Hujjuraat is all about. We ask Allah to guide us, make life easy for us in this world, take Shaitan away from our lives and take our lives far away from the Shaitan. ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا انك انت الغفور الكريم سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك